Hi, eCAT is a powerful electronic lab notebook designed for biomedical research groups. eCAT lets members of a research group create and import data, share it with other members of the group, and communicate using messages and tasks. Best of all, eCAT is simple to learn and easy to use. This video outlines a process for running an eCAT trial. It's intended for anyone involved in running the trial: PIs, other members of the lab, and IT people. The first part of the video is about setting eCAT up for a group of users. The second part of the video covers options for introducing eCAT to the members of the group who will be testing it. At some point, you'll want to set up accounts for users who will be participating in the trial, and that's probably a good way to get started. To do this, go to Users in the menu at the left of the admin homepage. Click on New Users and fill in the information for each user. You should also set up a group called All Users. I'll explain why in a minute. At some point during the trial, you may want to set up other groups. This could be useful, for example, if there's a group working on a particular project that does not involve other members of the lab. When you're setting up groups, you'll want to think about setting permissions. Permissions in eCAT let you control which users can access which records. Permissions work by inheriting the permission from the current record's parent and will cascade down the record tree. This is very useful in setting up projects that contain a lot of experiments. You can simply set the permissions you want on the parent project, and given that the From Parent checkbox is checked on the permissions page for the children, which it will be by default, the permissions cascade down to each child. Groups confer an additional advantage in that you no longer need to set permissions for each user. You can instead work on a group-by-group basis. The combination of groups and inherited permissions means that you only need to set permissions for a relatively small percentage of the records you set up. After you have your users and groups set up, it's time to think about data files. Many labs have a centralized file server to store their data. If your lab doesn't, it's really a good idea to think about setting one up. However your files work, it's vital that your scientists can get at their files inside eCAT. To enable that, you set up an attachment store. An attachment store is any file system that the eCAT server can see. You create an attachment store in the administration section. Setting it up is easy. You just supply the path to the start of the file system you want to see in eCAT and give the attachment store a name. You then select which users and groups can read that attachment store. When those users are browsing in eCAT, they can make links to and thumbnail their files when they're editing records. If you then enable some kind of network sharing for your users on those same folders, they're able to copy files to and from the centralized stores, and those files are immediately available in eCAT. Now that eCAT is set up, it's time to consider how best to introduce eCAT to your group. Depending on the size of the group, the level of interest, and the degree of comfort and experience with collaborative tools, you may want to consider a two-stage process, where you first introduce eCAT to 2 or 3 enthusiasts who become familiar with it. They then can act as evangelists and mentors in introducing it to the wider group. They may prepare their own teaching materials, for example, a PowerPoint presentation, which will be useful in bringing others up to speed. We recommend that you do 2 things for all new users when they are first introduced to eCAT. The first is ask them to watch the Getting Started with eCAT video. The second, as you explain how eCAT has been set up for your lab, covering any groups that have been set up, permissions, and on-site stores. Finally, please remember that we'll be happy to answer your questions and your users' questions. On every page in eCAT, there's a button that allows the user to post questions to the Axiop support forum. And we'll be happy to provide a web demo too. That can be useful at the start of the trial, and it sometimes can be useful after people have had some initial exposure to eCAT. Just send us an email or sign up for a demo on www.axiop.com.